Now, here's some imagery that you will never, ever, ever, ever see mainstream media talk about. As a matter of fact, it's not going to be talked about in such a way that the way that I found out about this was on Instagram, and the way that I found the article in which I'm going to read from is only relegated to the area in which this occurred. So, what you're seeing right here in this picture is State Representative Sarah Anthony. She's the one in the front with the coat on and the multicolored mask. And behind her is a man by the name of Michael Lynn Jr. And she was escorted into the state capitol building, which is in Lansing, Michigan, where you had those palm colored protesters basically running amok because they couldn't go outside and they were upset with the governor there, and they were escorting her to the building for her own safety. But if you notice, something is in his hand. That is none other than a military style weapon, like on some Black Panther type ish. Now, I'm going to show you some other images after I read the article, because there are some more images as well, but this is one of the main ones. It reads, and it was posted on May 6th. After a horde of armed and angry protesters swarmed Lansing last week, State Representative Sarah Anthony brought some extra protection on her way to the state capitol today. At least 3 African Americans carrying large rifles escorted Anthony across Capitol Avenue earlier this morning so she could safely attend committee meetings without fear of intimidation. She said she didn't necessarily request the help but welcomed the extra security nonetheless. We were all just appalled by the lack of support and lack of security that other legislators had, and the fact that a lot of the demonstrators last week were adorning many racist anti-Semitic signage. I think it just triggered a lot of folks, especially African Americans. Anthony and other lawmakers met this morning for an appropriations meeting. The scene was quiet. Anthony's cadre of Second Amendment advocates had no trouble entering the building. They left no quietly stand on the front steps after Anthony made it inside of an elevator. We want to change the narrative. First of all, we want people to understand that Black people can come out here with guns just the same as anybody else can, said Michael Lynn, a Black Lansing firefighter and community activist who helped organize Anthony's security detail. Now, that's what you call taking initiative. So I have to give kudos twice. I have to give kudos twice. One, to her for allowing these men to actually give her protection, even though they are not like official security, and 2, for them accepting the offer to pretty much do it for her with no questions asked. Now, you just heard this man is a firefighter. He's not a cop. I don't know if he has any military background, but he doesn't work in a profession that would require him to have a gun, but he does have one. And last I checked, Michigan, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is an open carry state, so he's well within his reach, or within his rights, I should say, to carry this weapon legally. Let me continue. Lynn watched a video that Anthony posted to Facebook as the protest formed last week. In it, she looked on from her office across the street as protesters slowly crowded the Capitol lawn carrying Confederate flags, Nazi symbolism, nooses, and other blatantly racist forms of imagery. After some demonstrators eventually made it inside the building last week, one maskless and gun-toting protester got so close to Anthony's face that she could smell his breath, and I bet it was a very ungodly stench. And lawmakers shouldn't be scared to come into work because of armed intimidation. The majority of the protesters were white, Anthony said, and I'm still not exactly sure on the connection between Confederate flags and Nazi symbolism. They just had no connection to the stay-at-home orders. The fact that they were carrying guns openly while we voted was unnerving. Anthony's concerns are largely based on complete failure of the Michigan State Police to maintain adequate security, she explained. She didn't find out until this week that police could have escorted her to her car after she left the Capitol. No other security measures were mentioned. Now listen to that. They knew they could have escorted her to the car, but they chose not to, and she didn't find out until the following week that could have happened. So they basically opted to not give this woman any type of security, even though that's what they were paid to do. So that makes this story even more better. They took the initiative and said, okay, bet, since y'all are not going to do your jobs, we're going to do your jobs for you and do it better. It was just unnerving to me as a woman and as a person Anthony said, noting that the Capitol sergeants otherwise do an adequate job keeping lawmakers safe inside. These community volunteers today won't be needed all the time, but they wanted to have a presence today. Because Lynn is black, he suspects the cops would have been a bit more cautious and perhaps violent had his group been as boisterous as some of the crowds last week. He wanted to prove a point that the Second Amendment rights aren't limited on the basis of race. I could hear the fear in her voice during that protest, Lynn explained. It was the visual of her being that scared to go to work. It meant we had to do something. We came out here today to make sure we could provide some protection, even if it's only to make her feel better. Meanwhile, the Michigan Capitol Commission is exploring whether guns should be banned inside the Capitol, according to the Detroit Free Press. The long-standing practice of allowing open carry inside of the building came under national scrutiny after last week's demonstrations. Some lawmakers wore bulletproof vests as protesters eventually made their way inside the gallery. Even some Republican lawmakers like Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey chided the protesters. Shirkey said a few acted like jackasses last Thursday afternoon. A few is an understatement. It's still unclear whether the commissions had the authority to restrict firearms inside the building or whether that would mandate an adjustment to state law. Regardless, the issue is an electric one. The Second Amendment can be easily infringed without the possibility of violent backlash, and despite the contradictory of today's armed escort, both Anthony and Lynn are vehemently opposed to allowing open carry inside the Capitol. They're just exercising their rights as they stand and ensuring an even playing field for everyone to get involved. There are certain things that are just inappropriate, Lynn added. We don't take guns in the courthouse. We don't take guns into City Hall. Why will we take guns of this caliber into the Capitol? I have 150 rounds on me right now. I could make a terror. I could wreak havoc. Lynn said he'd have no qualms should rules or law eventually prohibit guns inside the Capitol. Until then, it's his right. Anthony supports a complete ban of firearms inside the Capitol outside of law enforcement. At the very least, only concealed carry should be allowable, she explained. I will be advocating for a change for at the very least to ban open carry inside the building. For one, it's more intimidating. Obviously, we have a right to bear arms, but concealed would be easier. I don't think we need to be intimidated with large firearms while we're just doing our jobs. Now, one thing I did like about this guy here is that unlike those palm-colored individuals who just have to have that gun for intimidation everywhere they go, he knows his limits. Because at the end of the day, while he knows what he's doing, he knows what boundaries, or I should say what limits he probably has on himself as a black man. But he knows that it's not going to hinder him, but he's not going to be reckless at the same time like they were. See, they allowed them to just get away with that. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the story, but I'm glad that I was able to find it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch between different pictures so you can actually see some other imagery as well. Now, this right here, what you're seeing is actually a thumbnail from a video that was posted on YouTube. I think it was on YouTube, where you have her right there in the front, and then you have some other guys around her, and they're escorting her into the building. It looks like a whole different far cry from what we saw last week, unless that's the back of the building. And here's the other one I wanted you to see. Now, this is the Michael Lynn guy that was being talked about in the video, and these are three other guys around him. Now, notice what he and the other three guys have on that none of those protesters last week have. They have their mask. Now, he has his down beneath his chin, but he still has it. Unlike those protesters last week, they didn't have anything covering their faces. See, they're practicing their Second Amendment right while also being safe at the same time, while also protecting somebody else. This is what mainstream media will not talk about when it comes to black people. And also, this is something that many black people probably won't talk about either. A lot of people like to say, oh, we don't protect our own. We don't do this. We don't do that. I said, you'll be surprised how many actually do protect their own, but it doesn't get talked about because mainstream media will not talk about it at all. I don't have to say anything else further than that. But if y'all remember, a few years ago, there was an incident, I believe, down in Texas where this woman's son, I want to say, was attacked by this palm-colored individual when all he was trying to do was mow the lawn, I think, for his business, and that palm-colored man attacked him. I don't know if he harmed him. I can't remember the details right there, but I do remember this. That woman was fearful that she was going to get threats after what occurred. So what happened was, when the story went viral, you had a lot of, I'm not gonna say it was a lot, but a few black men armed with those type of weapons that actually stood and took security patrol outside of her house to avoid people coming in to, try to attack her. And what ended up happening, they got a hold of it, and the cops were sent to her house, and they basically placed, I think, all those guys under arrest, took their guns. They ended up releasing them, but I don't know if they gave them their guns back. So what does that tell you? That even when black people are trying to protect their own, it's still seen as a fearful thing, because they want us to be in a perpetual state of not only fear, but in a state of vulnerability. That's probably why some people don't do the whole protecting thing, not because they don't want to, but because they know what will happen when that occurs. They do not like seeing black people, especially black men, with a gun in their hands. If they don't, if they're fearful of you holding something as small as a revolver, and I'm talking about the little small revolver, what makes you, what do you think is going to happen when they see you with an AR style weapon? Remember what happened with those protests down back in 2016, the day that Michael Johnson did his thing down in Dallas, and you had those two black brothers who was carrying those same style weapons like these guys in this picture, and they thought that they was the ones that was involved with the shooting, but they weren't. But they picked them out of the crowd. Mind you, Texas is a very pro-gun state, very, very much open carry and conceal. And they were well within their rights to have them weapons for protection. They weren't bothering nobody, but they made a mountain out of a molehill. They put them under arrest. They took away their guns, but then eventually they had to let them go when they realized they had the wrong guys. They gave them back their guns, but they didn't even give them an apology. And I'm sure that there are many other stories like that. I just can't really think of any off the top of my head right now, but these definitely come to mind. The point I'm making is they do not like seeing black people protecting not only each other, but themselves. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. I give kudos to these brothers as well as to her for allowing them to give her protection, because she could have easily said, no, I'll do it, I'm good. She could have easily said that. But something tells me they wasn't going to allow her to take no for an answer. But they said she brought her own detail in and said, if they not going to give me protection, I'm going to do it. Or I'm going to give myself some protection. But y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.